Imagine a world where the machines you rely on threaten to steal your livelihood overnight. A world where skilled artisans watch helplessly as their craft is replaced by clanking automated looms. This was the reality for thousands of textile workers in early 19th century England. Their response was not quiet resignation, but a fierce rebellion that echoed across the industrial heartlands. They called themselves Luddites, and their story is one of defiance, desperation, and a desperate fight to preserve their way of life. Today we dive into the Luddite movement, a pivotal chapter in the clash between human labor and mechanization, analyzing the economic and political forces that drove these workers to take up sledgehammers against the machines. Our story begins in the late 18th century, when Britain stood on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution. The textile industry was the beating heart of the economy. Skilled weavers and knitters, known as stockingers, worked in small cottages or workshops, often owning or renting their tools. These artisans took pride in their craft, producing high-quality cloth that fueled Britain's growing trade. But beneath this picture of industrious labor, dark clouds were gathering. The Napoleonic Wars, raging from 1803 to 1815, crippled trade with Europe. Napoleon's continental system, a blockade against British goods, choked exports, while Britain's counter-blockade drove up the cost of imported grain. Food prices soared, doubling between 1809 and 1811, according to historian Frank Peel, who described the hard pinch of poverty entering homes where it had been a stranger. Unemployment spiked as markets shrank, and the working class bore the brunt of this economic storm. At the same time, new technologies were transforming the textile industry. The stocking frame, a knitting machine invented by William Lee in 1589, had been refined over centuries. By the early 1800s, wide frame looms and shearing machines were spreading rapidly. These devices could be operated by low-skilled workers, often women and children, producing cloth faster and cheaper than artisans. But the output was often shoddy, undermining the reputation of British textiles. As historian Eric Hobsbawm noted in 1964, the machine was not the enemy of the worker, but the way it was used to devalue labor. Factory owners, eager to cut costs, hired untrained laborers, driving down wages. Skilled stockingers who once earned a decent living saw their incomes plummet, sometimes by half, as documented in contemporary accounts from Nottingham. The political climate only deepened the workers' plight. The British government, fearful of revolutionary ideas spreading from France, passed the Combination Acts of 1799 and 1800. These laws banned trade unions and collective bargaining, stripping workers of legal means to negotiate better conditions. As Langdon Winner argued in his 1986 book, Autonomous Technology, the Luddites were not anti-technology, but anti-exploitation. Their anger was aimed at a system that prioritized profit over human dignity. With no voice in Parliament and no unions to protect them, textile workers faced a stark choice: adapt to a degrading new reality or resist. This resistance took shape in 1811 in the textile town of Arnold, just outside Nottingham. On March 11th, a crowd of workers gathered to demand better wages and more work. That night, frustration boiled over. Angry artisans armed with hammers and axes stormed nearby villages, smashing stocking frames in a calculated act of sabotage. These were not random acts of destruction. The targets were machines owned by employers who used them to undercut wages. The rebels called themselves Luddites, adopting the name of Ned Ludd, a mythical figure said to have wrecked a knitting frame in 1779. As historian Kirkpatrick Sale wrote in his 1995 book, Rebels Against the Future, Ned Ludd was less a person than a symbol, a Robin Hood-like figure rallying workers against injustice. Letters signed by General Ludd began circulating, threatening further action unless obnoxious machines were abandoned. The movement spread like wildfire. Over the next 2 years, Luddite raids swept across a 70-mile stretch of northern England. From Loughborough to Wakefield, Nottinghamshire, Yorkshire, and Lancashire became hotbeds of rebellion. In April 1812, the unrest reached a bloody climax near Huddersfield. A group of Luddites attacked a mill guarded by armed defenders. Gunfire erupted and 2 Luddites were killed. In retaliation, a mill owner named William Horsfall, who had boasted of riding up to his britches in Luddite blood, was assassinated. 3 Luddites were later hanged for the murder, as recorded in court documents from 1813. The violence shocked the nation, but it also revealed the depth of the workers' desperation. What drove the Luddites to such extremes? To understand, we must dig deeper into the causes. Economic hardship was the spark, but the fire was fueled by a profound sense of loss. These workers were not just fighting for wages, but for their identity as skilled artisans. Before industrialization, weavers enjoyed a degree of autonomy, working from home often only 3 or 4 days a week, as noted in posts on X. They organized into guilds that gave them collective power. The rise of factories and mechanized looms shattered this world, turning craftsmen into interchangeable cogs in a profit-driven machine. As cellist Glendinning argued in her 1990 Notes Toward a Neo-Luddite Manifesto, technology itself isn't the issue, but its use to erode human agency and community.
Do you like to dig deeper? Political economy is full of powerful ideas. You're right in the thick of it. Insightful, thought-provoking, expanding every step of the way. From Adam Smith and the rise of capitalism to Marx's bold critique, mercantilism, Keynesian economics, neoliberalism, and more. Or we explore it all, clearly and from every angle. Keep the momentum going. Check the links, dive deeper, and subscribe for more.
Politically, the Luddites were caught in a vice. The government's laissez-faire policies, championed by figures like Prime Minister Spencer Perceval, refused to intervene in industrial disputes. This hands-off approach left workers at the mercy of factory owners. Meanwhile, the Combination Act silenced legitimate protest, forcing dissent underground. As historian E.P. Thompson wrote in his 1963 book, The Making of the English Working-Class, Luddism was a response to the betrayal of the social contract. The ruling classes saw progress in mechanization, but for workers, it meant dehumanization and disposability. Socially, the Luddites were not a monolith. They included men, women, and even children who made up nearly 40% of the movement, according to Miriam Cherry's 2021 article in the MIT Press Reader. Women often led protests, cross-dressing as General Ludd's wives to mock authorities, as described by Richard Seymour in his 2019 book, The Twittering Machine. Their letters and manifestos showed a sophisticated grasp of their plight. In the Midlands, Luddites invoked the legitimacy of the Company of Framework Knitters, a recognized trade body, to justify their demands. In the Northwest, where trade institutions were weaker, they petitioned for reforms like minimum wages and bans on child labor. These documents, preserved in the National Archives, reveal a movement that was organized, strategic, and deeply political. Yet the Luddites faced overwhelming odds. The British government, desperate to maintain order during the Napoleonic Wars, deployed thousands of troops to crush the rebellion. By 1813, over 12,000 soldiers were stationed in Luddite strongholds, more than were fighting Napoleon in Spain, as noted by historian Malcolm Thomas in his 1970 book. The Luddites' Breaking Act of 1812 made machine breaking a capital offense. Dozens were hanged or transported to Australia, their families left destitute. By 1816, the movement had been brutally suppressed, its leaders dead or exiled. The Luddites' defeat marked a turning point in the Industrial Revolution. Mechanization accelerated, transforming Britain into the workshop of the world. But at what cost? The Luddite fallacy, the idea that technology inevitably causes long-term unemployment, was debunked by economists like Robert Solow, who in 1957 argued that labor-saving innovations boost output and create new jobs. Yet, as William Easterly pointed out in his 2001 book, The Elusive Quest for Growth, the short-term pain for displaced workers is real and devastating. The Luddites were not wrong to fear the immediate threat to their livelihoods. Recent studies, like those by economist David Autor in 2015, show that automation can exacerbate inequality as gains concentrate among the wealthy. The Luddites' legacy endures not as technophobes, but as pioneers of resistance against unchecked technological change. As Gavin Miller wrote in his 2021 book, Breaking Things at Work: Modern Neo-Luddism, calls for critically scrutinizing technology's impact on society. Today, as automation and artificial intelligence reshape our world, the Luddites remind us to question who benefits and who pays the price. Their story is a warning that progress without justice is no progress at all. Their hammers may have fallen silent, but their cry for dignity still echoes. In a world racing toward ever greater automation, the Luddites challenge us to ask, Not what machines can do, but what they should do for us all.